Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Monday, September 23rd. Derek VanRiper, Eno Sarris here with you, entering the final week of the 2024 season. We have some fantasy baseball championships that have already been decided, others running the full race all the way to the very last day of the season on Sunday. So we're here to talk about what happened over the weekend, some big news items. We'll talk about the head-to-head format in particular, which has been very cruel to one Eno Sarris this year. Other than your head-to-head situation, how was your weekend?
Oh, it was good. We got a little kitty. We rescued a kitten. So now we're in full-on zoo situation here at the house. Dogs
You're
and
already
cats.
90% zoo before.
Yeah, we got dogs and cats and koi, and thankfully we don't have any of those frogs anymore. That was a little over the top. But the kitty's very cute because it's like 6 weeks old, so it's like this big. And there's already fights between the kids about who gets to hold it and so on and so forth. And the actually underrated funniest part about this is that my wife wants to name it Katniss after the Hunger Games character. And my younger son wants to name him Kiseki, which means miracle in Japanese. And so the two of them are doing this sort of passive aggressive thing where they keep saying the cat's name. It's different. And I don't know. At least they both sort of start with a K sound, and maybe the kitty will get it. But it's a little schizophrenic. And I kind of want to tell them just to figure it out. But it is also funny to watch because they'll even do things like, and what should I do with Katniss? And what should I do with Kiseki? Like they're even like dropping the name in conversation to get back at each other. So that's what's going on here. It's fun. Also, shout out to my mom. Happy birthday, Mom! If you're listening, I will call you later. And excited, bought my tickets to First Pitch, and going to First Pitch Arizona to do a live podcast with you. And gonna do a pitching plus stuff plus update, big update that Max Bay keeps updating me out in our Slack, and it's pretty cool looking. He's doing some cool stuff. He's right now modeling batter swing and take by count, and he's trying to create a model that will predict swings by batters.
Very cool. Well, looking forward to that update, and also the whole conference, which you can attend. It's baseballhq.com. You'll see all the signage for First Pitch Arizona on their homepage. Sign up today. Make the trip. We'd love to see you out there. The live Rates and Barrels episode is scheduled for, I think, Saturday morning. So that's really cool. I think we'll be on the main stage this year, which is even better. So looking forward to all of that. And it's just one of those times a year where if you are celebrating a fantasy championship, or you just enjoyed the show all season, drop us a rating and review. It'd be a great time to do that. We appreciate the old 5 stars if you could do that wherever you listen to the show, or smash the like button if you're watching us on YouTube, as the young folks like to say.
Please tell me about your victories, because right now I have the ass. I was in 3 head-to-head finals last week, and I lost all 3. And to make it even worse, I think it makes it worse. Or maybe it softens the blow a little bit. One of my leagues splits into head-to-head and roto, and there's a split prize pool. And I won roto by 30 points. I have 170 points out of a possible 180. I think it is
pretty good.
Like I have the perfect team. I'm like first or second in every stat, and there's like 18 categories or whatever it is, 16 categories. So I feel pretty good about that league, and I still lost in the head-to-head portion of it, and I feel so dumb. I don't even know. And it's 2-week head-to-head, so I can't even be like it's just luck. Although there is still luck in 2-week increments.
Still a little lucky with 2-week increments. Yep.
I can blame myself. I was up against Robert Sanchez. I've never won Ottoneu. And in Ottoneu, if I had chosen Shane Baz over Pablo Lopez for their final starts, I would have beaten him.
It was what it came down to that one decision.
And of course, by process, you say Pablo Lopez is a better pitcher, probably put him in. Except this is points and home runs are terrible. And he was going to Fenway. And some part of my brain was like, dude, he's going to give up a homer in Fenway. He's going to give up a homer. Instead, he gave up 2 to Tristan Casas. And he was a negative 15, whereas Baz was a plus 40. That 55-point swing, I lost by 50.
Well, in your defense, Baz had given up a homer, I think, in each of his previous 4 starts, and he still hasn't
sort of
been
what I was looking at. Yeah,
he hasn't been elite Baz, even though he's been better.
But he was
as
home.
The season's gone on. He was home against the Jays.
A lot better against home.
Kind of a watered down Jays lineup too. I get it. I understand, but Lopez was probably the right process call, despite the outcome in this case. You could have just put all this into the void on our Discord, by the way. But
I did put some curse words in the void.
Okay, you did. I'm that's what it's for. It's for just spurts of anger that need to be released out into the world, but contained in a place where they don't harm others.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't think a long extended F word was the exact thing I needed to put on Twitter. So when it's threw it into the void on Discord.
Fair enough. So here's the question I have for you about fantasy baseball and the end of the season in general is what is the ideal end game? Let's start with head to head, right? I mean, 2 weeks does seem like a better approach than just a single week format. If you can make that adjustment or at least get in the ear of the person running your league and have that be the way your championship is structured, that seems pretty good. If you can split the prize pool between head to head matchups and roto, that seems good. It seems like your league format is actually great as far as finding the sweet spot to eliminate some of the luck and still keep the original head-to-head structure, or at least the aspects of it that people like, still somewhat intact.
Yeah, I don't mind. I like that league. It's also interesting. It's like Ks by batter, and like I said, it's like a 16 category thing. So what happens when you have all those categories? It becomes hard to game it, because if if you choose to be good somewhere, you're going to be bad somewhere. You know what I mean? It has average OBP and slugging in it, Ks by batter, and still has stolen bases. So if you're like, I want to go after stolen bases, you're going to have some bad OBP and slugging sometimes, So you kind of just have to build a good team of good players. And then, 2 week increments reduces the luck, but allows for luck component. And then you have Roto to be like, who was good all year? And then you have a head-to-head who was maybe a little bit better. Maybe I made some poor decisions when it came to, my bench and maybe I should have had some fleety speed guy that I could put in, at the end of a week just to try and win the category. So, you know what I mean? There's elements of head-to-head that I do like, which is how do I construct this roster to beat your roster in 1 week as opposed to just accumulating stats all year. So that might be one of my favorite leagues. That's the Pitchfork League that I don't think anybody's at Pitchfork anymore, but that's where it started, and it's got some fun people in it. I think David Roth is still in it, and so it's a good league, and I like that setup, because I think one of the things that's so difficult about head-to-head and the end game and stuff is the balance between luck and strategy is hard to nail exactly right.
I think it's extra difficult because, and this happens in all sports, teams have varying levels of things to play for, right? The completely eliminated teams are just trying to get to the final days without accruing any injuries that will impact them in the future. So then you have guys like Eric Wegman playing a lot for the Angels, and then we're left to decide, hey, Eric Wegman's playing a lot. He's got power. He's got speed. Doesn't strike out a lot. Maybe there's actually something here that can help us because it's a balanced roto profile, even though he's been old for the level and doesn't really have any previous big league experience. That becomes kind of strange, where you're literally letting the season, the final days play out with someone like that in your lineup. And I'm not sure that's necessarily the most satisfying end after spending entire winters and early springs prepping and planning and digging into the player pool to only have someone just randomly pop up at the end. That might not be the best part of fantasy baseball, but it's a part of fantasy baseball no less, regardless of the format.
It's probably
playing.
Probably true of any sport. If you think of,
for sure,
you were bringing it up, sort of third string running backs in week 16 and 15 when the other guys are being rested. I know from basketball that rotations, in the last 2 weeks are pretty terrible.
Yeah.
They're resting a lot of those guys because they really don't want like a sprained ankle going right into the playoffs. So I get it. And you could do things like, take your finals and do like, that's why my finals were last week in most of my leagues.
Yeah, and that's what it seems like many head-to-head leagues have done. They have made the second to last week of the season. That's the one where the playoffs end. I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I think years ago, I was more adamant, especially on Roto, we must run the entire race. We must run to the very last day of the season. And I think as my brain has hopefully continued to develop, or at least I've become a more reasonable person with age, I've started to think, maybe it's okay to end the season a week before the regular season. Even in Roto. Maybe that's okay because it's so sloppy.
It is interesting if you bring up Wagaman and like the last 2-3 weeks of even a Roto season almost feel like head to head. Like they take on take on a totally different sort of tone. Like I dropped my biggest dropper this week was Justin Verlander, and like I would never have dropped Justin Verlander if he was pitching like this and it was July. I'd be like, well, the stuff plus still decent, and like like he can get it going, like I'm just bench him for a while, No, not with 3 weeks to go. And you just start looking and be like, Justin Verlander at Cleveland. Do I want to start Justin Verlander at Cleveland? Like I can see maybe holding on to Justin Verlander for next year in a keeper league because you're not going to get any thing for him. And like I said, the stuff plus is still there. The velo at 94 is not atrocious. The command is still there. You could have a usable year next year. I mean, last year with a lot of the same metrics that he has right now in terms of velo and stuff and K percentage, he had a 3.22 ERA. So I think the truth is somewhere between a 3.22 and a 5.55, even for a 41-year-old Verlander. But all the stuff that I just said just goes out the window. You're like, do you want to start him at Cleveland next week? No. Goodbye. I'd rather have Mitch Spence for maybe a 2-start, and may not even be a 2-start because Mitch Spence will start the first one, and then they might say for the last one, we're shutting him down.
You hit your limit, you're done. Bullpen game, or we'll find some 27-year-old and just throw him on the roster for a day.
The Eric Wagaman of pitching. We'll find him, and we'll give him a start.
Yeah, like a cup of coffee spot start, which is in and of itself is a cool story. But again, if you're trying to decide this 26-week season on the fate of that, or the person who was supposed to start that day and they don't because there's information we don't have about someone having an innings limit, then that's the part that gets a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, and that's not really fantasy skill, right? That starts pushing it more into the luck where, like, I don't know. If I get a second start from Mitch Spence this week, is it luck or fantasy skill? It almost might be luck that I even get one, even though he's scheduled to be there that day.
It's some skill, some luck. I mean, you're reading the schedule and you're using your brain to analyze how many innings he's thrown before and how important he is to the organization and trying to guess. I mean, it's an educated guess.
But I mean, it also, in this discussion we're having, it's like ideal is like define ideal, and that's why I keep coming back to luck and skill is that the ideal game has elements of both. And I think that we each have our own sort of comfort with some sort of balance between luck and skill. And that balance is different for each person because some people love head-to-head. Like I've talked crap on head-to-head in the past and gotten yelled at for it, and I get it. You can in head-to-head turn around your fortunes a little better. Because you don't have all the ballast of all the bad days.
Right. You can also reshape your team a little easier. And even if you're competitive in 6 out of 10 categories, that might be enough. If you punt 4 out of 10 categories in a 5x5 league, I don't think you're usually going to finish in the money. But in a head-to-head league, that might be a way of taking a broken roster and making it competitive, just being consistently good in the same 6 categories over and over.
In Roto, picking the categories that you're going to go after in streaming and in the second half and changing is a little bit like head-to-head, because you will actually start to punt some categories. You'll be like, well, my batting average is not getting any better. I'm not getting any points there. So there are, no matter what you're doing, there's elements of strategy, punting, luck, skill, and player evaluation. I tend to like a lot of the keeper and dynasty leagues because I think that players are generally who they are over larger, if you give them larger time frames. And I don't love dropping Justin Verlander. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, you're playing fantasy baseball and you're dropping Justin Verlander. Okay, that doesn't make. I understand it because I did it, but I mean, like, you know, in a keeper league you wouldn't, because you probably have a little bit more value out of him still going forward.
Yeah, I'm in a keeper 16 team league where he was $5 in the auction this year. So he's $5 as a keeper next year. He's probably one of my 15 keepers, almost certainly as of today anyway, because for the reasons you mentioned, if he goes through this
feels more like
season and he's healthy,
feels more ideal, you know, to me.
Right. But he should be rostered and not just out there. I do think I enjoyed the Endgame in keeper and dynasty leagues more than in redraft, though, because of players like that. If they do get cut, someone picks them up. And it creates an opportunity. So
and it makes for, and that's another thing. A part of the ideal is hard decisions.
Yeah.
You know, something that happens. I haven't missed AL Labor was my AL only league. And I haven't missed it as much as I expected. What I loved about it was knowing every damn player in the American League down to, like, we're talking, you gotta know the 40-man rosters in the American League and probably some prospects who aren't on the 40, because, you know, it's that deep of a league. And I did like that part. But what I didn't like is there are not that many hard decisions in the course of the year there. You know why? Unlimited IL, you know, and six-man benches, and it's deep as heck. So every time you sort players, you're just looking at injury replacements that are playing this week. That's like really all you're looking at. So there's never really like I'm gonna cut this guy. It's a big decision. No, it's just like, I'm gonna pick up this guy to injury replace, and that's it. I mean, the wire, or I'm gonna hold on to money for somebody coming from the National League. But that's not, there's not really big decisions. I think there's like 2 or 3 big waiver decisions in the whole year in an American League only, in some American League only. So that wasn't ideal for me. I do like tough decisions. In keeper leagues, yeah, you have that where you're like, oh man, I really need a starter this week, and I don't have any starters, so I have to actually drop my $2 Landon Root just to get another starter. You know what I mean? Like, there's stuff like that where you're like, this is actually a keeper, but I gotta drop him because I won't use him this week. Yeah, Verlander would be in that same position. If you were super competitive, you didn't want to start him at Cleveland, you had him at a keeper price, you might drop him to get somewhere. So I like hard decisions. I like a little bit of you know, a thing about me is I like backgammon better than chess.
Really?
And
why?
Part of it is because backgammon is a dice game, and you can blame the dice.
Oh, you just like having a scapegoat.
Yeah. So you, in the context of my whining about my H-to-H losses, I'm just blaming the dice. If you want to read the underlying text there.
That's what's happening. Yeah, you don't want to be accountable for getting beat. You want to have a reason, you have something else you can blame. That's fair. It's like, what? I mean, like, backgammon's fun. I like backgammon, but like, I think most strategic people really prefer chess to backgammon. Maybe they're more accountable than you are. Maybe that's the difference. I do think, kind of wrapped up in all of this, there's also, similar to the mono league, what's become more popular over time are the draft and hold leagues that we play a lot in the early part of draft season. Usually they'll start up in late October, early November, and they run up through at least February. I think they cut them off sometime in late February, early March, because they're usually on a slow draft clock and they're 50 rounds. Draft and hold, of course, build your team, no in-season pickups. You have to know the player pool as well as you know it for a mono league. We've talked about how it helps us prep for the leagues in which we're allowed to make moves, because we're thinking a lot more about what those great endgame shots are going to be, or even some of the players that we're going to pick up in Fab at various points in the season. We know more about them from researching them in that round 31 to 50 range. But thinking about the endgame play there, when you have no moves and you play until the very last day of the season, you start to get caught up in players getting shut down because their teams are finally eliminated, or those chronic injuries are finally bad enough where it's not worth the risk anymore for the last week of the season.
And I have not really enjoyed the draft champions decisions for like the last month.
I kind of think that format would definitely, of all the roto formats especially, would lend itself, would benefit but from cutting the season about 2 weeks shorter. I'm not saying all the way up to Labor Day. I'm not saying we can't overlap football and baseball. Some people think that.
Just make it the rabbit of fantasies. They get out there first and they're done first. And
yeah, the format is a game of attrition. Like you're just battling against time and just hoping that you have healthy enough options to even have choices at the end of the season.
There's so many IL notes on your draft champions by this point of the season. Like I don't have any decisions in pitching in half of it. Like I have 3 draft champions leagues. I went through the pitching decisions. It was just like, okay, one reliever or the other reliever. Because everybody else
do I have 9?
Do I even have 9 arms? Yeah.
So that's one of the areas where I would probably move the end date up in Roto. 2 weeks. I mean, not a lot. Like if the championship had been decided a week before this past Sunday, would we feel differently about the format? No, it's still an extremely fun, challenging exercise. And maybe having a couple leagues end early makes it more fun to sweat out the ones that you're trying to win with moves too. I don't know. Maybe there's a hidden benefit in that for people that play in a bunch of leagues. But the other part of this is just looking at some of the players that are hurt right now. Some actual news. Like Rafael Devers is exactly the type of player I described, where we know he's been banged up for a while, but now that he's just done for the season, they actually have shut him down. He's had problems with both shoulders. He's not going to have surgery, so that's good news, I think, from a long-term perspective. Now you're just one key player shorter in situations like that. Sure, in the leagues where you have the end game where you can cut him, great. You cut him. It's weird, but you do because he's not coming back. You throw Spencer Horwitz or somebody in his corner, and life goes on. But as far as Devers, like in the big picture goes, I had him in a couple of leagues. He was banged up all year. And even in the first half when he was playing really well, Devers wasn't 100% healthy. So I look at him and I still see a guy that has a path to be an AL MVP. I think he's still young enough and still talented enough from a skills perspective to actually get on that level, especially when we think about another wave of young talent joining that roster in Boston and giving him an even better supporting cast to help prop up run and RBI totals around what should be consistent high 20s, but probably more like when he's healthy, mid 30s home run power. I still think that's the player Devers is, despite the health trouble this year.
Yeah, he's a tough one to prognosticate on. I mean, we do have this to show that there was something going on in his shoulders. March through July, he was he was swinging the bat 73 miles an hour plus, and fast swing was 35%, barrel rate 14%, hard hit 54, a slugging near 600. August to September, he was swinging the bat 2 miles an hour slower. His fast swing percentage was half as much. His barrel rate went down to 10%. His hard hit went down to 49. And his slugging went down to 329. And so, yes, definitely he's been somebody that's dealt with stuff over time. I think at 27 and, having the fact that he still managed to get past 600 plate appearances in each of the last 4 years, I don't want to rush to put any sort of injury prone tag on him. So I did 2 years ago, bold predict an MVP for him, or bold predict a 1,000 OPS for him, which he has not really gotten that close to. So I share your optimism about him, and I do think that there could still be a monster season where he stays healthy all year. I also interested in this idea. There's a quote from his manager, from Alex Cora, and he said, this is what he said. Let me see here. He said, This is from David Adler, and he's quoting Alex Cora. The bat speed, you can see it. He worked on a few things in the offseason, and one of those was to catch up with the fastball. And then we got to a point that he didn't. Teams, they noticed it and they attacked him. It was relentless. So I'm hearing between the lines that maybe he did some bat speed training. You know, and so his bat speed was up, and that was good. One thing I know about bat speed training from other people that I've talked to about it is, to some extent, you kind of have to do it all year. So I don't know if he didn't keep up with it, or if the bat speed training did lead to some shoulder inflammation. I've had
the opposite. Like if the shoulder inflammation prevented him from doing more bat,
from doing the bat,
either way. Could have got hurt from it. Could have been too hurt to do it.
A team person I was talking with was a team analyst, brought up the question of the stickiness of improvements from bat speed training. And so they were basically wondering if somebody like JP, the shortstop for the Mariners,
Crawford.
The JP Crawford's swing speed was up, and if it would come back down again. And I think what we're trying to fill in the blanks here is like, do some people do it for a little bit, get the gains, and then don't keep up with it? JP Crawford himself had some injury concerns. So are there injury concerns with it? I mean, there's been plenty of people who still think that, the weight of balls lead to injuries. So, I think there's a lot to say here. We don't have JP Crawford's bat speed before and after, because we only have 1 year of it. So we can't really answer all these questions just yet, but it's intriguing to me because I generally am pro bat speed training. And I don't know how to file Devers' year if it has something to do with bat speed training. I don't know how to process this, exactly. But I still think that more bat speed is better, and it does allow you to catch up to fastballs. And he was having a good time with high fastballs when he was swinging fast, and then he had a hard time with it afterwards. So. Still some unknowns here, but I think generally a 27-year-old who's been as good as he is deserves to stay up there. I do, would you rather Austin Riley or Rafael Devers next year?
Yeah, forever linked. There are some players in this pool that will never get away from each other by ADP, by various comparisons. I, at this point, think I believe a little bit more in Devers. Like the magnitude of Riley's downturn this year was a little bit concerning. The underlying numbers still look good enough where I don't think it's a runaway. I just think it's like, look at what Devers was able to do at less than 100%. It's still closer to his normal baseline. So the slightest of edges to Devers. But Austin Riley, I mean, how much of a discount do you think we're going to be getting on him next year? I feel like Devers is going to go for almost the exact same ADP, and maybe Riley falls a half round or a round, if not a tick more in some early drafts, and that might be a discount worth taking.
Yeah, at cost, it might be Riley just if he's cheaper, but I think if I had to choose one or the other, I think I'm going Devers.
Yeah, it's still an interesting toss-up though for those two players. By the way, I was looking at the player rater just to see like where did Devers finish this year among hitters. The new FanGraphs player rater we've talked about all season, 31st among hitters. Not bad given how poor the second half was. One spot ahead of him, Eugenio Suárez. Do you recall our conversation about Suárez probably in June or early July?
Where I thought he was toast.
Over. It looked over because there was as much swing and miss as we'd seen when he was bad.
He's 33.
He's 33. Suarez's first half, 216, 302, 366, and 87 WRC plus, right? It looked like it was
playing
over.
Blaze Alexander over him. And
then second half, got the K rate down to 24.5%, walked less, maybe just got more aggressive overall, but 314, 345, 624. For a 160 WRC plus. Suarez went from a guy that we thought was done, who might have a club option decline, to a easy club option picked up. And like, do we have a few more chapters of Suárez as this great veteran corner bat that, I mean, this is actually even better than what we've seen for most of the last 4 years because the average is better. He's got a 257 average this season. He's been in the 230s and lower. And that was in Cincinnati in 2021 when he hit 198. We've talked about the difficulties of being in Seattle. Maybe it just took some time to adjust to a new environment again, but now I'm sitting here wondering if Suárez is actually going to be a nice undervalued cornerback for next year, given the difficulty of finding power and given the quality of the Arizona lineup around him.
Yeah, I'm super nervous about 34-year-olds, so I'm going to probably not take too many shares, but that of course depends on cost. Did he even go in your meatball draft?
Oh, I wasn't in it, but I'm going to guess no. I'm going to check that. Did Eugenio Suárez? This is where if Siri could tell me that, I would have much more interaction with Siri. Like, where did Eugenio Suárez go in the meatball draft, Siri? And like for Siri to know what that is, to scan it and to tell me would be wonderful. I don't see him. I see purple for the corners for the third baseman. Nah, I don't see him on this board. That was 11 rounds.
Third baseman that went.
Vientos and Bregman back-to-back picks in the 10th round.
Which I think I take them both over him.
Right. But I think right below where the meatball draft ended, 15 teams round 11, that's probably about where Suárez is going to go. Pick 175, 180. Not necessarily bad, but having a much, much better season than that I would have thought, especially given the way the first half went down. A couple injury updates to pass along. We're waiting for some news on Yordan Alvarez having some imaging on his knee. It's not a flare-up of the previous knee problems he dealt with. It's an injury that he suffered sliding into a base over the weekend. So tough call for weekly leagues if we don't get the results of those MRIs. Good news, the good news would be they do play on Monday. So perhaps we will have at least an indication as far as in or out of the lineup on Monday if you're trying to decide if Alvarez should be in there. So that's more of a wait and see situation. And we've been in a holding pattern with Francisco Lindor as well. He's optimistic about returning before the end of the regular season, but I think it's 7 consecutive games now that he has missed with that back injury that's been slowing him down.
Yeah. I think he'll be back because they said he was doing baseball activities. They showed him running on the field before, and so I think that he'll contribute this week. The Yordan Alvarez is going to be a really tough decision. You have to watch your lineups till the last second, and if he misses one day, that's not that big a deal. But if he misses the whole week, that is a way bigger deal if you put him in for the whole week. So good luck making that decision. And then generally the role of health and what we're talking about with the draft champions. I just thought there was a funny thing that we had a funny interaction because I was in our league that we were in together. That we just randomly, we didn't plan it, but we did an early
knucklehead maneuver getting into the same league. That's so dumb.
But we did. My tendency was to blame injuries and information, and I was saying like, my third DC is in second place, and that's the one I drafted latest. I had the most information for. And you're like, yeah, we all got more information. You should have had more of an edge early, when you had more information. So, I was looking at it, and yes, I have Shane Bieber on the IL 60 along with JP France, Patrick Sandoval, Kyle Bradish, and Spencer Turnbull. So I did lose some players to injury, and that's actually really typical, I think, of most draft champions. I think what is more meaningful is that I changed my strategy a little bit over time. And, one of the guys that sort of sticks out for me is Joe Boyle. And, I took Joe Boyle in the 29th. I took him right before JP Sears. And I think that's a bad process because with Joe Boyle, I'm chasing, upside, when with that pick, I should have been focused on just getting a player who's going to pitch, get innings, get choices, because the best thing you can do in your DC is have 2 or 3 starters on your bench that are healthy, Like that is a really good situation for DC, because then you can be like, oh, 2 starters, and you can really and you can avoid Colorado, and you can actually have some choice in the matter. And so that's why Joe Boyle was a bad pick. I also think a couple rounds before that, I took Eugenio Montero, and I was thinking, oh, I need a third first baseman, and I panicked, and I thought, oh, Montero's the last third first baseman I really want, behind him is just Carlos Santana and Rowdy Tellez. I don't really want those guys. Well, dude, do you really want Eugenio Montero? And if you don't, then he's just like Rowdy Tellez and Carlos Santana, and you can wait. And if I had just decided to wait, I could have gotten Ronaldo Lopez in the same round as Eugenio Montero, and then this team would have been so much better off if I had gotten Ronaldo Lopez and JP Sears, not because JP Sears is amazing, but that would have given me more choices all year long with pitching. And I'm bottom shelf pitching there. So I guess my sort of injury related, format related plea, and I think this might be true to all formats, but is very important to DCs, is attack the middle. Attack the middle when it comes to pitching, because you need a ton of pitchers, and the end pitchers. Yes, the team that's in second place, I picked Bowden Francis in like the 45th round, and that has been amazing for me. But you can't count on that. The final 5 pitchers you pick in DCs are just total shots in the dark. No matter what you say, I know you can talk to me till you're blue in the face about how you had strategy and you picked the right guys and you're winning your DC because you picked the right guys. Yes, I get it, but it's really hard to nail that process. It's a lot of pitchers where you're just shots in the dark. And so if you do a better job on starting pitchers 5 through 10 than other people, I think you win more DCs than anybody. And I think that's probably true in main events and other places too. Like, I think it's true that it's almost more important what you do with your pitchers and your 5th through 10th best pitchers, starting pitchers, than it is necessarily with your first couple. I mean, you're going to have bad injuries at the top,
Yeah, you're going to have to cover some of your own injuries, but you're also, how do you feel like you've played in the main event consistently now for 4 or 5 years in a row? Like, I've had a couple of years where I haven't played in the main or the big auction. It wasn't easy 2 years ago. In prior, I played, 6 or 7, I think, out of like 8 prior to this little break. I am finding, even in the non-high stakes leagues, 15-team leagues, it is hard to stream pitching, like to even just stream it, to just play the matchups. Everyone's doing it. Everyone wants to do it. So getting the bids right is very tough, and roster management makes it tough. So, the best defense you can play against streaming is having enough pitching depth where you don't have to as often. You don't you're taking your shots on guys that might stick around on your roster because that could be worth it. But the on again, off again, trying to get that 8th, 9th pitcher in 15-team leagues especially is tough. 12s are different. To me, it's like a key difference that at some point, I'll try to see if Vlad Sedler can come back on the pod, because Vlad is great in all formats, but I think his self-described best is the 12-team RotoWire Online Championship. And I have always found it hard to toggle back and forth between 15s and 12s because I get too clingy to a lot of players on my roster. But at least in 12s, there's a little bit of streaming room built in there. Fewer teams, so a little more churn on a week-to-week basis. I am finding in 15s, I want to avoid streaming if at all possible. Like, streaming is a bunch of guys broke, or I was wrong about a couple of guys and a bunch of guys broke. It is not the plan in a league that deep.
Yeah, and in my main event, this is my third actually, which is my third year. We are fighting for third, and we have the most pitching points in the league. And I guess we picked early pitchers, but we really weren't trying to. We picked 2 pitchers in the first 10 rounds, George Kirby and Joe Ryan. And those were good pitchers to pick, but we didn't do a lot other than them. 2 in the first 10 is actually a reduced investment in pitching.
Sure. I think typically you're looking at 4 starters in the first 10 rounds and at least 1 reliever for most of those builds. So it ends up being 50-50 hitters and pitchers in the first 10 rounds.
Yeah. And we have the most pitching points. What happened was we hit the sort of Seth Lugo area really hard. And we had I forget. I mean, we've another thing that I've gotten used to in this is that it's really hard to see who your roster was all year because you're just moving guys. You know, you just got to keep it going. And that's something that I think that somebody that like Vlad would say is you got to keep moving. You know, and but you know, we ended up with trying to see who might have been Tanner Houck, Seth Lugo. Who else might have been on this all year? God, I don't know. But we ended up, I think we've lost some guys to injury, but we ended up with a really good situation where we didn't have to stream because we had three healthy starting pitchers on our bench. If you have three healthy starting pitchers on your bench, you can avoid bad matchups. You can stream 2 starters from your own bench, you know, and that's the ideal situation. I want to have basically my streamers be my bench.
Yeah. That's ideal if everything goes really well. But I think that's the part of the board that I want to play more aggressively in the future is that range you described, basically the post pick 200, like the 200 300 range, or 200 to 350 range overall. That's where I think you can do really well in pitching. And hopefully that's something that as a show we've helped people with, even if we haven't drafted enough players in that bucket, we're at least identifying the right ones and helping people along that way. But man, it's tough. It's tough to stream right now because people are looking at the same tools through the same lens. They're analyzing matchups in a similar way, and everyone needs more pitching for the most part. So it's competitive bidding each and every
attack
week.
The middle. That's another reason. Attack middle is like you'll come out of the draft with like 2 or 3 more starting pitchers than you think you need, you know, and not have them all be like end game, like the last 5 rounds you pick pitching. Like, you know, I would sort of sneak all that up, you know, finish with flyer bats because you will discover bats over the course of the season on the wire in almost every format. Like this.
Speaking of flyer bats, like this is one I'm so frustrated right now because I have 0 Jonathan Aranda, no Jonathan Aranda on my teams. And
I've had it in the past, but not now.
Oh yeah, yes, exactly. And that is basically what I'm getting at. He's hitting cleanup right now. This final week plus now for the Rays. He's homered in 3 consecutive games coming out of the weekend, and for the season, he's been mostly up and down. 124 WRC plus, 23% K rate in the big leagues. He's one of those players. He's going to be, I think, out of options next year because this was his last option year this year. So the Rays are going to have to make a decision throughout the offseason. Keep, trade, move on, whatever. And then if they keep him, which I assume they will, they have to make a clear decision on how they're going to use him. We're talking about a guy that has some defensive limitations, although he's 1 game away from getting to 20 at first base, which is great because it keeps him out of the UT only bin for our draft purposes.
But not a lot of games at second anymore.
That looks like that's pretty much done. If you're in a low threshold league, he's got 5, so qualify there in some leagues with really low previous season thresholds. Now, from a skills perspective, we're dealing with a really small sample, but a 19.5% barrel rate. Still a heavy ground ball rate, too, around it, which is a little bit weird. 6 homers and 121 plate appearances because of the 3 that he hit over the weekend. I'm starting to kind of fall back into the, dang it, I like this guy for a reason, and he's showing me just enough to be part of that endgame cheap power bat strategy again going into next season. But I don't think that's bad. I think it's if cost remains reasonable, if it's a last 5 rounds pick, round 25 or later, I think it's okay to take a shot on Jonathan Aranda and know that if it doesn't work out, the playing time might not be there. Maybe it's a big side platoon role instead of an everyday role or something slightly less because of his defensive limitations, then it's a move on. But would you agree that we're seeing enough in the small sample between the improved K rate and the great barrel rate to try and take that flyer one last time in 2025?
Yeah, this is one of those ones, and it's probably true all the time that the depth chart is your friend. So I'm also have the payroll chart open because it's the Tampa Bay Rays. And you've got Yandy Diaz with $10 million due to him next year. And then Brandon Lowe with $10.5 million, which I thought at some point, I thought they might not pick that up. I think they're going to pick that up. If they pick that up, those are two guys that play second, first, DH. You know, I think Brandon Lowe can still play second a little bit. Yandy Diaz is first. I just picked up Yandy Diaz's defensive page, -3 run value at first. So not really a good first baseman either. So I could see Yandy Diaz being the Tampa Bay Rays DH next year. Brandon Lowe plays second. Jonathan Aranda plays first. Junior Caminero plays third. And who am I missing?
Where does Christopher Morel play? Or
he was already playing OF. Oh, and DH. He was playing DH.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a problem because of Morel, at least as of right now, because Morel could platoon with Aranda between first base and DH. Yandy's a righty. Lau is a lefty. And I don't think second base really matters for Jonathan Aranda. Like I think we can kind of safely say it's first base DH. That's what he is. Mm-hmm. You have to find a place for the other guys they still care about. Morel, since the trade, 3 homers in 43 games. The slash line's worse. He's striking out more. Barrel rate's down. Hard hit rate's down. I mean, it's a new environment. It's a tough place to hit. So some of that could be a factor. Maybe they're working on some stuff where they're having him try to change something. I haven't seen anything suggesting that yet, but it could be out there.
He's still projected to be, by the BATX 110 WRC plus, even the worst projection system as 100 for him in Zips.
Right. But at what point are we going to look at Christopher Morel now that we're 1,400 plate appearances into his big league career and say he might be one of those players whose projections exceed what he's likely to do because he does some StatCast things well that the BATX will reward him for, but he has other flaws that are not captured that will continue to be a problem. And that's not even taking into account his defensive limitations, which can nuke his playing time very quickly, right? So I'm just wondering if Morel is one of, air quotes, those guys who will be projected at a level where people stay interested and he will perform at a level where we're continually disappointed. 2023 might be the outlier. Like that's the thing everyone's going to point to and say, no, look, the Rays have a great track record and look what he did in Chicago with the 26 homers, 247's fine for an average.
2022 looks a lot like 2023. Both those years are good.
Both of them are good. 2023 is better though because the power, it's 10 more homers and a similar number of plate appearances. That's he needs that extra gear.
We look at barrel rates, we look at max EV a lot, we look at hard hit rates, and that's where Morel shines. He's obviously, he's kind of like the Nick Pivetta of hitters.
Right. Yes. This can happen, right? You have guys that are underprojected that consistently exceed the Lodem guys, but then you have the overprojected guys that underperform. I think this might be more of the latter. I think this might be a skilled guy that doesn't quite have enough to put it all together, and people might be chasing something that's just not there. The reason I'm not writing him off completely is just because we've seen the Rays take a whole bunch of different hitters and find ways to make them very productive. So it'd be foolish to say it can't happen, but I'm worrying that he's one of those guys.
There could be an element of sort of Tyler Glasnow, Pittsburgh Tyler Glasnow to him, where it's like, he's all stuff and no refinement, and they can sort of maybe simplify the game plan or do something for him. I just, in terms of team structure and teams and salary and like who they have and where they're going, I see him as part of the outfield mix. I think you look at his outs above average. Yes, they are terrible everywhere, but they are less terrible in left field than almost anywhere else. So, I stick him in the corner outfield. You've got Josh Lowe playing the other corner outfield or center. And then you have the ongoing discussion of who's going to play center field for you with Siri under contract and, I guess Richie Palacios can be part of that conversation. So there's some, Dylan Carlson, I guess there's some discussion about like, I think who plays center. Maybe if Josh Lowe can play center, then it opens up your options for maybe a veteran signing in the corner outfield. In any case, I see Morel as part of that mix. I see an opening for around a DH. I think Caballero and Walls are just fighting for who's the starting shortstop and who's the utility guy. And Caminero's ensconced at third at this point. So I don't actually think this depth chart's too hard to figure out. I think I feel pretty good about that. And I think the only real battle is for shortstop and center field to some extent.
Yeah, it's sometimes this depth chart destroys us, but I think the player I'm a little worried about as far as Aranda goes is Morel, and I can't quite figure out if and when Morel is going to make some big adjustments. At offseason, it's a long time to make those changes. The same would apply to Carlson for what it's worth. Like Dylan Carlson could be a completely different hitter by opening day, depending on what the Rays have.
Because he has been a different hitter in his history. He's had years where he barreled the ball and struck out more, and he's had years where he didn't strike out at all and he didn't barrel the ball at all. Yeah.
We've seen a little wider range of outcomes so far. Hard hit rate in Tampa, right in line with his career norms. An improvement from where he was earlier in the year with the Cardinals, but kind of back to the average version of himself. So more to come, of course, on the Rays always, because there's constantly movement there.
I'll have some Morel shares next year. I'll beat myself against that again.
You just take that loss one more time, maybe. I mean, look. It's not dumb. I just think I'm trying not to put too much stock into the contact quality in this instance because it seems like something's still not quite right. Let's take a look where the money went this weekend, which is a great reflection of the weirdness of your last opportunity to make tweaks. We talked about Hunter Goodman a little bit, I think, in passing a week ago. In 12-teamers, he was scooped up in a lot of leagues where he was still available. Rockies are at home to start the week, too, so that probably sealed the deal for anybody who was on the fence about him in more shallow formats. Always fun to get some injured guys back, like Ozzy Albies and Jordan Westburg came off the IL this weekend, so they were popular ads in the leagues where they were available. And then you look at the pitching names. Jack Kachanowicz. Sure, why not? Like,
two-starter. It was Kachanowicz, Jonathan Cannon, and Mitch Spence were the widely available two starters this week. I went with Spence and Cannon over Kachanowicz.
You didn't take the guy with a 9.3% K rate?
No, it's nope. You know me.
That's what the end game is, man. Like, it's a perfect illustration of what we're dealing with. Even Cannon, like 17% K rate so far this year. It's ugly. So you went with Spence.
Yeah, I'm like, do I think I'm going to get a win?
Yeah, right. What do you need?
Well, I would say that for Kachanowicz too. Like,
yeah,
you think you're going to get a win? That's why the nice thing about Spence is why he's clearly the number one guy. Is that like he pitches for a team that might actually get him a win.
Mm-hmm. Landon Knack picked up again in a bunch of 12-teamers,
which is great for the first start, like we talked about last week. It's great for the first start, and then he gets at Colorado as the second start.
That's right. Rockies home all week because they close out with the Dodgers at Coors, which makes a bunch of things.
I have like a Blackman pickup. I have Eric Wagaman picked up twice. One of the Razzball projections say I should play Eric Wagaman over Brandon Nimmo at least Monday through Thursday. Because Wagaman's in Chicago against the White Sox. And that's one of those ones where I'm just like, again, this is just like the Pablo Lopez situation where I'm weighing, my gut is kind of like Nimmo. Like that's a big bright light series, right? Mets, Braves.
Yeah, it's a huge one. And then think about it too. Like this is like the equivalent of the pitcher who's dealing is going to be facing the heart of the order a third time. And the book says you should take him out, but your gut's like, I think he can probably get through this 3, 4, and 5 group one more time. And you have to decide, like, and maybe it's really more of a coin flip than the actual numbers would tell you. So you have to make the choice and live with it. And I think that's okay. That's fun. Like that's what it should come down to.
Put Baz in over Lopez.
Yeah, you're still living regrets there.
I'm really angry about that one, but
the void's still open. But I think one name that popped on the
we
bottom
actually
of this
picked
list,
up Morel in our main events.
you can't quit him. But now that
we picked him up over Julian, who's just not playing.
You and I both know that because I suggested it might not work for Morel, he's gonna hit 4 homers this week. So you're welcome, everybody. I literally have him nowhere. So that tells you everything you need to know. Luke Weaver popped up on the bottom of this list again, which it's not a surprise that in 12s he's starting to get picked up because he's been getting saves. And I think the bigger question with Weaver is long term. Like, this is a fantastic season, sub-3 ERA, below 1 WHIP, over 100 Ks now in 83 innings. It's a really heavy workload. Former starter, so maybe it's a little easier to put that kind of workload on your arm and come back and be fine the next year. But Luke Weaver is a completely different pitcher in this role at this stage of his career than he's been in the past. And I know you had a chance to talk to him recently and kind of just get a feel for some of the adjustments that he's been making. But this has the look of a true closer profile. Is this the answer for the Yankees in 2025?
I think so, yes. And we managed to talk just about his changeup, which, by movement metrics, it doesn't stand out, but you get a little sense of why it's good here. He's improved it, even metrically over the last few years, and we talked about that. But then also, there's a little bit in here about pronating that I think is fascinating. So here's just a little minute long interview with Luke Weaver about his pitches.
All right, I'm here with Luke Weaver, and he's got a plus changeup that's pretty awesome. Can you show us your grip on your changeup?
Yeah, so right here we got I do kind of a one seam. So what I'll do is I'll have a traditional circle change grip, and what I'll do is I'll get this finger on here, and that's my guide. That's something that I'm ripping. This finger is just for support and just kind of slip off the side of the baseball. So the goal is to then, when I'm coming through the ball, I'm trying to pronate and I'm trying to kick this ball. And I'm trying to get this thing spinning a certain way in order for it to kill vert and to create movement.
You've killed a little bit of vert over the last couple of years, so you have been fiddling with it. What did you change?
With the fastball.
Oh, I thought with the change. I thought you getting.
Oh yeah, so I had a different grip. I was just getting behind the ball too much, and then this was slipping out. So then that created a lot of ride. So I was essentially just trying to kick the ball and create more seam shift.
And people were talking about so a pronator. Everyone pronates when they're upon release, but you pronate a little bit earlier. You're talking about
natural pronator, not a supinator.
So that means show me that thing where you're showing like you're pronating into release, like earlier.
So it's kind of coming through like this, where most people might be here and then going. I'm kind of turning all the way, so then it's kicking the ball. And kind of like Devin Williams, it's a lot of side axis that's coming with it. He's the master at it, but that's the idea of that kicking it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, there's that important point, like even on a curveball where people talk about supinating and being on the index side of the ball, like on the outside of the ball, that even when you're throwing a curveball, at the way that your arm protects it, the way you throw, if you slow it down, you'll see you actually pronate at the end. You kind of turn that curveball over, and that's actually why it's important, in fact, to hold it the way you do, because you kind of turn it over at the end, But when you saw with him is he's he's pronating earlier, and that I think that is when we were taught pronating, supinating. That's an important part of the discussion. Is everybody pronates, but the pronators kind of pronate earlier, and that makes it hard for them to turn over a curveball. Right, because they're already pronating as they go in. They don't have that like I'm supinating, then pronating. Like they're kind of like I'm already pronating going into it. So he's never had a good breaking ball. And the other stuff we talked about that wasn't on the video was that he changed his grip a little bit to get more spin efficiency and ride out his fastball. So that's his fastball's better. It's also throwing a lot harder. And then lastly, his cutter, he's kind of dialed in a cutter. Where it's in good shape. It's probably the best his cutter's ever been. It's the first time his cutter's registered as above average by Stuff Plus. So now he's got 3 pitches plus a really strong changeup out of a closer is kind of rare-ish. So that might be that speak well to him, like this guy's a little different. And I don't normally like change up first guys, but when you have velo and ride like he does now, I think he's going to be the closer for them next year. And there's also some subtext that why did the other teams that he was with never do this? And he is not uncoachable. Like I've been talking to him for a long time. And one of the things that he said early on was he bought a Rapsodo and asked the Rapsodo people what he should be doing. And that's sort of like alarm bells for me. It's like, why are you asking the Rapsodo people? Even referred to it at one point as guesswork. And I'm like, it's not supposed to be. You got to the Yankees, it wasn't guesswork. They were like, hey, let's do this, do this, do this. And you were good. So there's still some teams where a player goes there and there's a plan and it's not guesswork. And there are still some teams where it's a little bit more guesswork. So I think the Yankees pitching development is in a decent spot. And I think Luke Weaver is our closer next year. He's under contract next year for $2.5 million. Clay Holmes is gone. If they're going to sign Soto, they may not sign the best reliever on the market. They may just, try to piece together a good bullpen. So I think Weaver's the closer next year. I think he's a good pickup and a good guy to have for next year.
I mean, he's going to finish this year probably with a 30% K rate, backed by a 15% swinging strike rate. He's got the 3 pitches. He's messing around with a knuckle curve. He threw it like 11% of the time last year. I think he's thrown 17 of them total this year. But I do think the feel for spin, the feel for pitching is definitely something Weaver has. The curiosity, like all of those things are good boxes to tick. And I wonder if the combination of the way his 4-seamer and changeup interact with each other, if it actually does enable each pitch to be a little more effective. Like if they're like a well-balanced combination, having a third thing to work off of them is particularly helpful.
He doesn't need the Bradish slider. He just needs a good slider. He needs something that's okay. He needs either the curve or the cutter, I think, will be okay enough that in the context of his fastball and change will be good.
I mean, I think it's almost certainly still high leverage. Is there a non-zero chance that he'd go back to starting again if needed, though? I mean, he threw enough innings this year where he could be another one of our Ronaldo Lopez, AJ Puck experiments in the spring in the right situation, too. Like, I think the velo,
the thing that really stands out to me is not the change in movement on his cutter, but the change in velo. Because he's at 91.3 on the cutter this year. And that's the first time, like I said, that his cutter has really registered this well. What happens if, the cutter goes down to a 95 stuff plus cutter? Is that enough? Right now Stuff Plus says his curve is 92. So that would make him a 2-pitch pitcher with kind of meh breaking balls. I don't know. Is there somebody like that? It's Gossman-esque, I guess.
Yeah, maybe that could be. I mean, he's not that old. Luke Weaver's only 31. Not that old to get it back as another role. Anyway, I think there's a lot of ways for him to be good. I think that's a
really good DC pick. I think because it's like it's going to be 80 to 100 innings depending on what his role is. They're probably going to be good innings. He's going to be in the major leagues. $2.5 million salary. Yeah, I wonder
in early drafts where he's going to go. That's a fun question that we'll get an answer to hopefully in the next couple of months, as we move through the start of draft and hold season. So a lot of ground covered today. It's weird the last week of the season, but hopefully we had some fun along the way. If you'd like to subscribe to The Athletic, you can do that at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. We got a big breakdown on the Tuesday show this week. We're going to take a look at the biggest flaw and some strengths, but the biggest flaw that you might be worried about with each playoff team. So we'll dig into that on the Tuesday episode.
We won't be having a live stream on Thursday. There's tons of reasons, not least of which is I'll be at the last A's game that day during the day. And then for the last one of the season, how about we get some feedback on Discord about the format of that last regular season podcast? I mean, some of you may want some information for the weekend and still be in it and want to care about, should we talk about streamers for the weekend? I think another couple of things that could be interesting is looking back at our biggest wins and losses, like our biggest in terms of takes, like our biggest guys we liked that were good and guys that we liked that were bad. Would you like us to focus on one of those? Like what happened with the misses, what happened with the wins, that sort of deal. So go into the Discord and let us know what you would like most out of that format of that last episode, because it's yours. It's the end of the season. Whoever's still with us gets to decide, really.
Yeah, I mean, if you're still listening every day in September, we really appreciate you, because you're the diehards. But we appreciate everybody throughout the year. Let us know on Discord. You can get into the Discord with the link in the show description if you're not already in there. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for